So let's talk about Arks of Omen Farsight, where Games Workshop have told us basically most of the contents of the book. Let's talk about what's here and what isn't. Hello and welcome back to Warspecs Tactics, where today I thought we'd do a quick overview of what's in the Arks of Omen Farsight book, as Games Workshop have just told us recently from a Warhammer community article, plus the hints and teasers that we've had so far, and if there'll be any new rules for Mr. Farsight, which it looks like there might well not. I'm sure for people who've been following along with the channel, most people will know that Arks of Omen Farsight is coming out this week. It's the fourth book out of 5 in Games Workshop's Arks of Omen series, the narrative where the Chaos make some big space hulks into some great big nightmarish capital ship abominations, and then throw them at an unprepared galaxy while they're trying to find some fragments of a key to build some sort of mysterious superweapon that we still know nothing about. So far we've had the Abaddon, Angron and Vashtor books. Book number 4 out of 5 is Farsight. The last is most likely to be the Lion given the rumours. I suppose it could credibly be Dante though, given that he's a major figure, and we do know that his model is coming 100% because it leaked out. The fourth instalment is due out this weekend. It goes up for pre-order on Saturday the 25th of March, and it comes alongside the new Farsight model, which is first going to be available in the boarding patrol for Tau Empire, and then hopefully will be available individually, but that might be a fair few weeks after. With their previews, we already had a fairly good idea as to what was going to be coming in this book. They have just given us a fair few more details though. As with the last one, there's no new rules or updated datasheet for Farsight in here, and there isn't really much indication to say that he'd have more rules coming as a digital download either. There's lore in the book of Farsight versus Orcs and Chaos, and then a fair bit of content for the boarding actions rules, multiplayer games, dark depths missions with different terrain, and several different factions' content, including the Tau, Eldar, and Sisters. First up, starting out with Farsight Rules, it currently appears that there's going to be no new datasheet for him just in general, never mind in the book or not. I wouldn't really have expected it to be in this book in the first place, seeing as Azrael and Vashtor didn't have their datasheet in there. They came as digital downloads the week before the book released. Vashtor obviously needed one as he was a completely new model to the game. Azrael I would have expected to get one, given that when they get their Primaris update, the Space Marine characters get an extra wound or so. But so far, Games Workshop haven't actually made any such announcement that the new Farsight model will get an updated datasheet, though if they did decide to make one, I wouldn't be entirely surprised either. Strictly speaking, I'm not sure that he absolutely definitely needs a new datasheet for this model. The war gear is very similar, with the Dawnblade, plasma rifle and shield generator. The main things that have changed is that he's in a slightly bigger and snazzier battlesuit. He's got a hexagrammatic ward type thing that's on the Dawnblade, which could represent a psychic denial or something in game, I suppose. Plus, there's some new lore that he's got an onboard AI called Supernova. Again, it could be cool if that had some kind of in-game effect. I feel like if Games Workshop wanted to, they probably could make a new datasheet for him and publish it digitally as Azrael and Vashtor did, but so far they haven't really given us any hints that they're actually going to do that, so we might just be left with the datasheet in Codex Tau Empire. Having said that, he is fairly popular in competitive lists at the moment, obviously for the Enclaves, not for Tau Sept. Gives the advantages of a Crisis Commander plus some fairly massive melee with a big damage of 3. It does seem that his points efficiency is enough to compete with the other commanders, even though you can make a bunch of very scary builds with their custom options. I guess seeing as he's a pretty relevant choice, it means that there's less need for an updated datasheet. You can still be putting a nice new model on the table and not feel bad about it. Though I feel like a new digitally updated rules would have been quite fun to go hand in hand with a snazzy new model. Either way, it's definitely not in the book. Looks like it's not happening in general, though Games Workshop might issue a digital datasheet in the near future if we're lucky. Otherwise, that means that the actual content of the book is split between the lore of Tau vs Orcs and Chaos and then the boarding actions rules. I feel like the bit that's perhaps more interesting to most people is maybe the lore of it, the unfolding narrative of Warhammer 40k, and just what's happening with these Arks of Omen. From the way that this was set up, I really wouldn't be too surprised if this just winds up being a fairly hefty side story, kind of similar to the Angron book, where it's basically the story of him just wrecking a big Imperial bastion. So far from the hints and teasers, it doesn't look like there's any major hints that it's going to have a big impact on the Dark Angels versus Vashtor narrative. It sounds like they're gearing up for the second round of that in the last book. From the details that we have so far, the book starts out with Farsight fighting against Bad Moon Nazdreg and his War of Daka, the fun conflict where the Orcs loot all the Tau guns, stick them all together in some glorious mech creations, and then proceeds to shoot them back pretty hard with their own weapons. That's been an ongoing conflict in the lore for really quite a long time, and it sounds like Farsight's been getting the upper hand in that, fighting alongside the Eight and his snazzy battlesuit, and overall winning the war. Then, when the orcs are on the back foot, Farsight gets plagued by visions requiring him to return to Arthas Morlock, the spooky dead world where he recovered the Dawnblade, the item that allowed him to break free from the Ethereal's programming, potentially a Chaos relic of some sort, granting him unnatural long life, as well as being a weapon of pretty potent power built into his battlesuit. Once he's back there, wouldn't you know it, but a Ark of Omen arrives, a big Bale fleet under the command of Demon Prince Ogalax. Supposedly he's a Black Legion Demon Prince, who I think was introduced in one of the early Arks of Omen books, unless he's been present before. I believe there were some lore fragments on him fighting through the Cadian lines to get a fragment of the key there, and it looks like he's back for another one, which I'm guessing is going to be on Arthas Morlock, if that's a place where you find some mysterious Chaos relics. So far we don't know the details of the ensuing fight. Apparently the Farsight Enclaves are going to be pushed onto the back foot between the Orcs and the Chaos, as you perhaps might expect from an enormous enemy army materialising in real space. I'm sure there'll be lots of excuses for more boarding action style battles, and maybe a showdown between Farsight and this Demon Prince, and I'd hope that Farsight might come out on top there. For this book, we've also got 4 tarot teasers as to the story. We've got the Horde with a hand reaching for the Dawnblade, the young warrior, who I believe is Farsight holding the Dawnblade, leading a Tau-like horse into battle, a red-garbed fool holding up a Tau ethereal staff. He appears to be standing on the bodies of a whole load of blue-skinned aliens. I guess that would represent some major disasters for the Tau Empire there, and a lot of Tau dying. And then perhaps the last one is the most mysterious of them all, the Tree of Life. I guess some sort of major discovery by the Tau Empire that probably turns the tide. I kind of hope that this narrative impacts in some way in the overall story. The last couple don't really seem to have moved on the narrative in any major way, other than perhaps setting up for a conflict between Vashtor and the Dark Angels, and Vashtor having more bits of his key, though we don't know how many he needs. I'd hope that maybe this one will actually have some bearing on the last book, and isn't just its own standalone story. So far there's no mention of Snickrot in the book either. I guess that he might pop up for a small segment or something, seeing as he is having his new miniature come out, and Games Workshop have said that he's likely sneaky around some arcs. Then the other major section of the book are the boarding actions rules. It sounds like there's basically 2 different sections for generic rules, and then a bunch of faction-specific stuff. The mission rules introduce a game mode where you can play a free-for-all game with either 3 or 4 players, or 2v2 missions, aiming to have a few more people involved than just 1v1 on these small boards. That seems like quite a fun idea to me, to be honest. It's a bit more of a casual game, and you might often have more people than just 2 wanting to play. If that is something that might interest you, it might be worth picking up. The book is still fairly expensive though, at like £35 or $60 US. The other bit of the book is another terrain shake-up called Dark Depths missions. Apparently the system for this is going to be each player nominates one section of terrain that they can bring alongside their army, and then when battle is joined, the 2 boards get matched up together. So it could provide a different terrain rule shake-up compared with what you'd had before. To be honest, I do kind of wonder how much need there is for more playing around with the terrain rules. They've already got a whole ton of different maps and missions set up for this thing by now. I kind of feel like people might be a bit oversaturated for that kind of content. Definitely sounds fun, but I'm not sure this one is the biggest selling point compared with the multiplayer missions. I guess the biggest advantage for this one though is that Games Workshop has made it very skippable if you don't want to pick it up. It's quite nice they're not forcing in match play supplements in this, so say if you wanted to play one of the factions to the best of their ability, you'd theoretically have to pick up a very expensive book which might only have a couple of pages of rules in it. I'd say that more than anything is perhaps a bit of a positive. Then there's a few different faction rules for the boarding actions ones. These sections give you things like enhancements for the leaders, representing warlord traits and relics that work in boarding actions. Plus on top of that you get a small selection of stratagems as well, things that are maybe a little bit more limited and restrained and targeted to the units that you can actually play in the boarding actions game, as opposed to having the full list of factions from your codex. The factions featured in this one are Tau Empire and the various flavours of Eldar, Crash Worlds, Drukari, Harlequins and Inari, plus the Sisters of Battle as well. Kind of weird that they don't have orcs in this one, seeing as they're fairly front and centre in the narrative. I believe that they were in one of the past 2, maybe the Vashtor one perhaps. Again, still not huge amounts of content for any one faction here for a very expensive book. It might have enough value to you if you play one or more of these factions though, plus you want the generic boarding action rules things, and you really want to get all the pretty pictures and the lore. So anyway, there's a bit of a breakdown of what's in Arks of Omen Farsight. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Are any of you thinking about picking up this book, or is it going to be a pass for you? I feel like these have kind of limited appeal. Boarding actions is certainly played, but much less so than more generic 40k. And books like this one even aren't auto-includes, even if you're super into boarding actions, depending on whether or not you want the extra content. In any case, feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics if you'd like to see more like this. I'll aim to do a quick lore summary of the book at some stage once we have more details. Should be interesting to see what the outcome is of the Farsight fight. If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, where I'll certainly keep the regular 40k content coming. I do tend to post new things just about each day, so feel free to subscribe or check back later if you'd like to see more. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and you can find that linked in the video description below. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, an enormous thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.